Hello, Nathan here with PixelPipes, and you may have seen this card in the very last Pixel Box episode. This was the Cairo 1, also known as the Hercules 3D Prophet 4000 XT 64 meg. And today I'd like to just do a little, gameplay video, and also want to do a little restoration on this card as well before I stick it in the computer. One of the more obvious things is the caps, especially these two here. You can see this one is nice and flat on top, but these have domed a bit. They haven't split open just yet, but that will eventually happen to all of these. And normally when you restore a graphics card, those would be one of the first things to replace. However, it may frustrate some of you that I will not be doing that in this video. I'm actually really frustrated with my soldering equipment right now, and I just need to get better stuff, even like simple tasks like cap replacement. It gets really tedious and aggravating, so we won't be dealing with that today, but we will be addressing the fan. Now, of course, if this card doesn't work at all, then we can safely assume the caps are the problem. But oftentimes, unless you have a really severe case, it will still work, even with less than ideal caps. You just don't want to leave it that way in the long term. Now, the fan on this one is fairly stiff. So if we bring in one of my other ones, how it should be is like that. It's real easy. You can flick it and it will spin for a while, and then you can see when it comes to a stop, it kind of springs a bit, because it's nice and loose and smooth, and this one is not. And pretty much all but one of these coolers that I have acquired has been stiff like this. And whenever I want to restore a fan to good working condition, sure, you could replace it, but for something like this that you want to keep the original look, you want to try to get the original fan working. It's actually, when you look closely at it, if I can get it to focus in, it's not really that dusty. If we can kind of look inside, and if you can see that too well, but underneath the fan blades, it's actually pretty shiny there. So this is not dirty at all. More than likely, the person that sent this to me, one of my friends on Discord, probably cleaned it before he sent it. Come on, get back in focus. So it's not necessarily a buildup of dust, at least that we can see, but it could be that the axle is gunked up. So let's go ahead and get this fan removed, and I'll show you what I do to free these up. So the first thing we want to do, of course, is remove the fan, and obviously I'm going to pull this connector out. Comes out really easily, and we could just take these screws off here, there's 3, and remove the fan, but I actually want to take the whole cooler off by pinching these pins here, if you can see. There we are. So yeah, these come out pretty simple. You just get some needle nose pliers or whatever you have handy. Careful not to be too rough. You don't want to scratch the PCB. There we go. So that should just push right through, and do the same on the other side. There we go. So now this should just come right off. And there it goes. So yeah, underneath the story is a little different. There is actually quite a bit of dust on there. That looks pretty gross. And moreover, the paste, which appeared like it was pretty poorly applied in the first place, not even covering the entire chip, has completely turned to just dust, essentially. And that is a byproduct of the moisture slowly seeping out over time and eventually leaving only the ceramic substance underneath. So we're going to go ahead and clean that off with some alcohol and get all the dust as well while we're at it. Alright, so we got some extra paper towels and some pesto Q-tips. I'm just kidding. And 91% rubbing alcohol. You don't need to have 91% in particular. That's just what I prefer to use because it's readily available. They make higher. It goes up to 99, I think. And it goes lower, and I think lower would work just fine. You could do 70% if you wanted. We're just going to go ahead, get that wet. And let's just clean this off. Very quickly came off. Look at that. Just a couple of wipes and it is very clean. I'm going to get in a Q-tip and get those side pins as well. Go ahead and get that wet. There we go. Actually, what might be easier is if I just simply clean the bracket when I remove the fan, because that should just come right off, right out of there, and I won't have such a tight space around each pin, so I can clean it a little better. So for the moment, we'll go ahead and take care of the chip and the surrounding area. Now, I've never found alcohol to ever harm the silk screening on the chip. It has never had any issues as far as in my experience, so don't be too afraid of that. I wouldn't scrape really hard with anything, you know, like a sharp edge or anything, because that can scratch off quite easily, but the alcohol won't damage the label in any way. But as for the areas in between these small resistors and tiny capacitors, we're going to actually use a toothbrush. This is one I snuck out of the bathroom. This is what my wife uses. She has no idea that I also use it to clean graphics cards. So that'll be just our little secret. Alright, so that's looking a lot better already, but you know, this will remove a lot, but it will kind of move things around as well. So we want to kind of blow some of that off now that we've loosened it, so we can go ahead and use some compressed air for that. And now that we have blown the dust out from underneath and all around, you can see it's all built up around here. So I can go back to the cloth to get some of this off. Clean the edge connector while I'm at it. Yeah, so everywhere the alcohol went, when I sprayed it with the air, it just kind of spread out, but it actually does make it a little easier to clean off afterwards because it's not stuck in all the crevices. Some up here near the VGA connector as well. And then after that, we're just gonna dry it off a little bit here. that looks pretty good. Well, I think now we're going to move on to disassembling this fan and getting it nice and loosened up and working good. Okay, and now we got the fan out. Actually doesn't look bad underneath either. Usually you'll see, yeah, there's a little bit of dust, but really, for its age, it doesn't look bad at all. So yeah, there's a good chance this was cleaned off, especially given how much dust was around the chip. So now we can get the bracket out of here. I can clean it off a little better. I'll actually use the toothbrush for that as well. All right, look good as old. So let's get this fan spinning good. All right, so the first thing I try is the simplest option, which is I'm gonna go in here with some electronic cleaner, contact cleaner. I guess this is kind of a rip-off of Deoxit and probably isn't nearly as good. But I have managed to free up fans in the past just using this. So we'll give it a try, and if that doesn't work, I have something else I can try. Alright, so right in there, in between where you see the little brown PCB, you want to get up kind of underneath the plastic hub of the fan and just completely douse it. So let's give that a try. I'll kind of spin it a bit to loosen it all up, and right away you can see, look how much better that is. It's not perfect, but it does have that little bit of a spring to it now. Let's do a little bit more. Does anybody else do that? I get a kick out of that. That is working a lot better already. So it is almost there. It's almost there. You can see, but you can kind of hear it. So there's a little bit of noise there, and in comparison, this one, no noise, and it's just ever so slightly more free. So I'm going to try one more thing. We can peel back this sticker here to get to the axle. So yeah, when we peel back the label, you can see all the gunk in there. That's where the axle is of the fan, obviously. And there's so much dust and just junk that is built up inside over the years. This is very common with these old fans like this. So let's try once more with the contact cleaner. Clean that surface off while we're at it. Is it any better? I don't hear it as loudly, but there's still a little bit of scraping still. So one last thing. I have this, which is a lubricating oil intended for model trains and such. but just a drop of this stuff is extremely potent. This will go really far on its own, so we'll just do that. Now, some people go so far as to remove that gray plastic C-clip that holds the axle in place. I have tried that in the past and they tend to shatter, and I have no idea how to get replacements of those. It's just really tough without the right tools. So we'll just kind of work that in there. And we can also try some inside. I can get this all the way down inside to the axle. So just squeeze a little bit there. Oil is not typically conductant, so we don't have to necessarily worry about that. That is so much better. Alright, and just to seal it away from more dirt getting inside, I'll just place a little piece of electrical tape right on there. Just like that, and it's good to go. Not much dust on the inside here, but we'll go ahead and clean that off as well real quick. And now we are ready to apply some new thermal paste. This is what I'll be using, just regular Arctic silver, Arctic alumina, ceramic thermal paste. You don't really need anything fancy for something like this. It doesn't use a lot of power. And with our newly reassembled fan, we're just going to push in the pins and press that on a little extra tight, and then of course reconnect the fan, and there we have it. It is restored and the fan spins freely. Very nice. You would be amazed how many graphics cards are sold as not working because somebody didn't have the know-how or didn't want to take the time to clean off the fan or lubricate it or anything like that, and you end up with something sometimes pretty valuable for cheap, just with a little bit of repair work. So yeah, let's go ahead and give this a test. Alright, well, as you can see, we have booted up into Windows and drivers are installed just fine. Unfortunately, with my capture device, it doesn't want to cooperate if I try to use a resolution any higher than 800 by 600, so limited there. It can play games at a higher resolution, but we're just going to go with that. We're not going to spend too long playing games. Also, I do apologize. I know that the pixels over here are a lot clearer than the pixels towards the middle. I'm not sure if that's to do with the VGA output on the card itself or more to do with the pixel alignment of the VGA to HDMI active adapter that I have. More than likely it's the latter, so yeah, not the best quality, but we'll just quickly play through a couple games here. I also really like the PowerVR tools utility. So we have all the 3D optimizations, as it calls it. So we can disable vertical sync. You can also turn on anisotropic filtering and force trilinear filtering, which you probably don't want to do on a Cairo card. And supposedly for games that require hardware transformer lighting, you can fool it into thinking that the card has that, which if you know anything about the Cairo series, or if you have watched my past video on the Cairo series, you know that it does not have hardware transformer lighting. Go ahead and disable vertical sync under OpenGL as well, because we want all the screen tearing. So we're going to turn on Fraps. And just to show you that it does work. Alright, we can just load a quick demo here. This is the one I benchmark with. It's the very beginning of the game. So again, this is running at 800 by 600. I think trilinear filtering is enabled. So if I were to turn that off, the frame rate would probably be a lot higher. This is pretty low, especially for a game like this. In the 20s right now. This game is quite a bit newer than this card. This is the original Cairo, which originally released in 2000. Obviously, it was in production and continued to be sold for a couple years after that. And if you happen to buy the card hoping to play Serious Sam 2, well, you couldn't use these settings. You got to lower it some more. Matter of fact, let's just try that real quick. If I just go into the video options here. It's not under texture settings where you would expect it to be. You have to scroll down to rendering control, and then you can switch this to bilinear filtering, and that should boost the performance quite a bit. Yeah, no kidding. So now we're in the high 30s, low 40s. Trilinear filtering just kills the Cairo series. They only have 2 texture units. It's a 2 pipeline card with 1 texture unit in each. And the clock speed is not very high either, so yeah, fill rates are not good. But yeah, I mean, under these settings, someone who wasn't particularly picky about having a high frame rate could definitely play this game. Matter of fact, ooh, technology test. I haven't seen that in a while. Wow, frame rate's actually pretty good. As you can see here is the cube map effect, geometry distortion. So if you are unfamiliar with this is obviously just a technology demo, but I mean, it's interactive. It's not like a benchmark. I mean, you could probably record a benchmark demo in this, but it's like a custom map meant to show off all of the features in the game. And essentially what it is, it's kind of like a museum. So you go into each room, and it says right there at the bottom, basic texturing. And then if we go over here, texture layers and blending modes. Reflections. That tanked the frame rate when I walked in here. But yeah, this was typically a very expensive technique. A lot of times it involved, at least at this time, pretty much rendering the scene twice. So yeah, there was a way to do a render to texture. I don't know if you could do it on this era of hardware, but certainly you could on later generations. So you didn't have to render the geometry twice. Portals. So this is pretty cool. You can, again, the frame rate tanks here, but you can. I mean, this has got to be using a render to texture here, right? I don't know how else they could have done this. This is literally texture mapped with another environment, although it doesn't look like it's distorting with the geometry at all. So maybe this is just, I don't know, I'm not a graphics programmer, but it's cool to see. This is a haze effect. Kind of just looks like hardware fog. No, this is fog. This is even less expensive. procedural textures. So basically it's using procedural textures to animate the water. It's not really distorting with your interaction. It's more of a static, fixed animation there, but it was still a pretty nifty effect back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Lens flares. So now we're really getting cinematic. And then the last room is animating lights, which is, if we ignore the annoying flickering one here, you've got some that are dimming and changing colors. So that's pretty cool. And this is the Temple of Models. The previous one was the Temple of Effects. Diffuse shading using a classic teapot. Specular shading. So specular highlighting was something that started on fixed function hardware, was later replaced by per pixel and then, you know, programmable shaders. But I mean, it looks pretty good. Here we have environment mapping. So essentially what the artist would have to do is take the environment and render it into a texture. So this is not actually geometry that's reflecting on the tea kettle. This is just a second texture rendering pass that's applied to the surface. We have detail mapping, translucency and transparency, multiply and add blending. It's also nice to know that the graphics card can support all of these. So if you ever used Photoshop and you had to blend layers together and there was multiply and add, that's essentially what this is. So this would be your additive blending here. Multiply obviously makes it look darker. We got some particle effects. Models in fog. And this is the true form room. And this would have been, they look exactly the same, right? Well, you had to have ATI hardware to see a difference. So the two models side by side, one would look as you see it now, and the other would have true form applied, which was basically a very early form of tessellation. So it would take simple geometry and increase it or you know, enhance it and make it look smoother. Unreal Tournament runs very smooth at this resolution. Yeah, the Cairo series was really interesting. You know, if you've seen my previous video on it, they generally rendered everything, you know, pretty much perfectly. And, you know, they were often accused of being an antiquated architecture, kind of a souped-up DirectX 6 architecture, but it was really more special than that because being tile-based renderers, you know, they didn't have a lot in common with conventional graphics chips at that time. And, you know, being that it was a company, you know, PowerVR, or actually more accurately, Imagination Technologies, they were, you know, the underdogs, to say the least. And especially in the PC market. And here they were producing graphics cards that were, you know, extremely functional, extremely comparable in many ways to the products of more popular companies, bigger companies like Nvidia and ATI. So I always found the Cairo series really interesting, and it's always kind of fun to play games on Cairo-based hardware, even though it doesn't really have any functional. It's not really a benefit to it necessarily, but you know, it's amusing anyway. And then we have Expendable, which I gotta be honest, I never got the hang of the controls. So, you know, looking at it, it looks like it should control like a twin stick shooter like Robotron or something like that, but instead you hold forward and then you steer using the mouse, and it's just, none of it is very intuitive at all. So, oh, and then it just randomly changes the camera angle on you. But, I mean, while the frame rate is not great or anything, I mean, it's in the 30s right now, it is playable. Holding shift to strafe does help a bit. And when you pick up a weapon, you kind of just use it until it's gone, and then, yeah. I don't know, this is definitely an odd game. I don't know that it was ever really that popular. I mean, I guess it was somewhat popular. It got a re-release on GOG, and not something I played back in the day, but I guess some people did. So yeah, I mean, that's really all I wanted to show today. I'm kind of taking a break from the more serious content for a little while, and just you know, doing some simpler stuff until I really get back into the groove of things. But I hope at least a few of you enjoyed it. But as always, thank you for watching, and take care.